I wanted to use this video to discuss my feelings about what occurred in Uvalde, Texas back in 2022. I'm not going to show anything graphic. I'm not going to show any part of the killer's face or anything, not even if his eyes were blacked out. And I'm sure as hell not going to mention his name. But I do want to talk about the police response or lack thereof, and how I hope I would have reacted in a similar situation, with the caveat, guys, that I wasn't there. I know that. But at the same time, I want to be honest with you and myself in terms of how I think I would have reacted based upon my own experiences as a game warden back in South Dakota for almost a quarter century. And you can't get into that kind of position without getting a sense of who you are and what you're able to do and how you're able to react. I was able to react to the brown-colored situations fairly consistently. Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but it seemed like the darker shade of brown things got, I was still able to maintain that consistency. And that's what I want to talk about. And yes, I have to criticize my former profession. The best way to deal with that is let the officers speak for themselves. But the one group that has the absolute right to criticize the police are the parents. And if you're a parent watching this, you know how you would have reacted. You know. And you wouldn't have needed to carry a badge or a gun or law enforcement credentials either. And please, please, please leave a comment. Let others know, including myself, how you feel about it. That's important. And anyway, we'll get into this, and as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks. Okay, this is going to be a combination of memory and ad-libbing. So the different situations as a law enforcement officer, they're good situations, they're the bad ones, and then they're the ones that we would call, the routine. The good ones, you might have made a new friend, they shake hands, you might exchange business cards, or there might have been a young person who you were able to mentor somewhat. And the bad ones speak for themselves. It just starts with people who aren't cooperative, and there just really isn't any attempt to communicate. And then there's the routine that are neither good nor bad, but everybody's cooperative, and then when you're done, you just go on your way. And we'll move on to the potential resistance an officer might encounter. Well, there's verbal. That's the most common. Defensive, where they're trying to get away, but they're not actually trying to hurt the officer. Active, where, you could get hurt. And the fourth one, again, just ad-libbing here, but the violent resistance. And you know what violent resistance means? All four. It doesn't have to just start violent. It can start verbal, go to defensive, then violent. It can go verbal, violent. It can go violent. It can go verbal, active, defensive, active, violent, active, or back. And in a theoretical world, each one of the four has their own level of control, or, method of control technique that an officer can use. And that goes back to training. Well, it also goes back to officer temperament, because officers are unpredictable. Now, this is where officers are supposed to be able to at least try to de-escalate, as long as the officer isn't the one who escalated in the first place. When you're dealing with somebody who's walking that line between cooperative and uncooperative, it's not the job of law enforcement to push somebody off the line into the uncooperative section. I can tell you the worst example of what I did, even though, I was dealing with multiple anglers, but I didn't start the escalation, but neither did I attempt to de-escalate the situation. So I had the instigator, his first name was Alden, who was right outside my driver's door, and then the two relatives of his who were standing kind of behind, a little bit to the right of Alden from my perspective, sitting in the truck. Two takeaways. Number one, like I said, don't say or do anything that would push an otherwise uncooperative person who's walking that line between cooperative and uncooperative over into the uncooperative half. And the second thing was, and of course this is going to make sense, but you still have to think about it and be aware of it, is the longer the confrontation lasted, the more likely it was that those two relatives standing by Alden were going to join the fray. And what do you think happened? Had the fourth one, who was sitting in my truck, decided to join the fray, I don't think I would have survived it. And that's how quickly it can happen. And those who want to go into law enforcement, and those younger officers, you've got to listen to what I'm telling you. Just don't get stupid. And very few people are going to bend over and kiss your ass. Get used to it. It's part of the job. Law enforcement encounters that require a use of force, well, number one, they're tense. Number two, they're unpredictable. And the third one is they're rapidly evolving. Well, speaking of tense, unpredictable, and rapidly evolving, you want to take a road trip with me back to South Dakota, Lake Campbell, and look at the precise spot where I had that confrontation with Alden and his crew? Not to worry, I'm not going to freak out. It may be a bad memory, but I'm not going to freak out. I'm fucking everything I've got under control here. All right, I'm going to show you where the confrontation with Alden took place. This is the south side of Lake Campbell. The lake goes off to the right. You can see it through the trees. And the left is a waterfowl production area. It's public water, but it's not actually part of the lake. Oh, I spent so many hours up here. So this is exactly what it looked like. And I'm talking a long time ago, you know, going on over 30 years. But that's what the bridge looked like. My truck was parked like the white pickup is facing right or north. My truck was facing straight ahead or west. Just pulled off to the side there on that dirt. And surprise! That's my first game warden truck, a 1981 Ford F100 two-wheel drive. Anyway, I found that. So there it is, right about where it was when Alden decided he wanted to rip my head off. Alden and his crew, the angler on the right side of the bridge, that's where they were. And anyway, made contact, and you know the story. The confrontations took place right where my truck was, because I was in it. And after everything was said and done, you see the left side of the bridge, there's some anglers there. Well, there was a small group of anglers who were fishing right at that spot. And there were probably 24 in this area, witnessed everything. But I talked to the small group that was fishing where the people on the left were fishing in the picture, and they told me we thought we were going to see the murder of a game warden. It was that bad. So there you go. Time to move on to the tough subject of Uvalde. I want to make sure I begin here. My typical response: I could recognize the threat. I could slow things down even though it was occurring in real time. I could scan and assess the threat and react accordingly. Those 4 steps: recognize, slow things down, scan and assess, react. Of the 4 responses, the one that I found to be the most beneficial was number 2, the ability to slow things down even though it's occurring in real time. This ability develops over time, and it's by no means a unique experience. When I saw this picture, I had to include it. I mean, to me, it's representative of what happened that day. The confusion, misdirection, not sure which way to go. Blurred or unblurred, let's make sure that we don't forget these guys, the victims. You know, I'm just going to let this roll, let you guys read the headlines and kind of absorb the information. There's probably some here in these headlines that you probably haven't read before or heard before. It's pretty frustrating. And what I want you to do is just wait for the very last one. Just wait for the very last one before this series ends. I don't have the words.